This training video has been specifically aimed at laminate worktop fitters who wish to enhance their skill base and in doing so increase their installation opportunities with this solid surface product. The material has been manufactured and engineered in the UK to be easily installed by competent fitters of laminate worktops. There are only two significant differences between the fitting of this solid surface worktop and that of a laminate worktop, and they are the gluing process and the finishing process. All other installation methods for fitting this solid surface worktop are the same or similar to the fitting of a laminate one. To successfully fit and finish these solid surface worktops, you will have to purchase a glue gun applicator, a starter kit, and hire or buy a good quality random orbital sander and a separate electrical dust extractor. Please note that without the dust extractor, the random orbital sander will not be able to perform its task correctly, as the sanding pad will clog and lose all of its cutting ability, and the final finish attained will not be to the required standard. Before starting to fabricate the worktops, you will need to make a colour check between the boards by wiping with a damp cloth over the pieces to be joined. Please note that all new edges need to be applied before the tops are jointed together because of the machining that has to be done post fabrication. The tops are manufactured with a front and two short edges already applied. We will now demonstrate how to fabricate and finish a straight edge application. It is important to use a clean white cloth to avoid any contamination of the adhesive. The cleaning fluid is called Minerelle. Do not use coloured cloths as they contain a dye, and the Minerelle can leach this colour out and contaminate the adhesive. Check that the adhesive is the correct colour for your design before you proceed. Put the applicator gun together, remembering to push upwards the small lever at the back of the stock when inserting the carriage. Allow one adhesive cartridge per 600mm joint or edge. Do not scrimp on the adhesive. Place the adhesive cartridge into the housing and fit the nozzle, making sure it is locked into position. Spill the first nozzle's worth of adhesive to ensure the hardener and coloured adhesive are mixing correctly. Optimum working temperatures for the adhesive is between 16 and 26 degrees. If colder than 16 degrees, it is advisable to create some localised heat during the gluing time. Apply 3 thick beads of adhesive, approximately 2/3 of the contents of the cartridge, and spread using a clean spatula to avoid contamination until a full face coverage is achieved. This is to one face only. Offer up and clamp the edge into position, ensuring that a full exuded adhesive bead is achieved top and bottom. It is important to leave this bead of adhesive on the surface until it is hard. This is because the glue shrinks back into the joint when drying. When adjusted and satisfied the edge is correctly positioned, leave for 35 minutes or until the adhesive has set. Using a router with a trimming bit, take off the excessive material from the top surface and then repeat for the underside. Where edge fabrication work has been done, it is important that the underside has been finished off to an acceptable smooth finish. Using a 180 grit sanding pad, use your random orbital sander with electrical dust extractor attached to smooth the underside of the fabrication flat, and then repeat for the top surface. The newly applied edges now need to have a 3mm radius created top and bottom to match the standard factory produced radius edges on the rest of the tops. This can be easily achieved by hand sanding. Shaped and curved fabrication work follows the same cleaning, gluing and finishing techniques as the one described for straight edges. First of all, you will have to cut and shape the top. Templates are a good solution here. In its cold state, the edging is very brittle and rigid, but by introducing heat, shaping can easily be achieved. By heating the entire length of the edging strip to a minimum 100 degrees centigrade, the tightest radius that can be achieved is 250 millimeters. To heat the edge strip, you can immerse it in boiling water direct from a kettle for approximately 40 seconds, being careful to avoid body contact with the boiling water. Always use a safe and suitable container for holding the boiling water and work on a stable base. Use a pair of tongs or a similar extraction technique to take the edge from the hot water. When forming, you will have to work quickly, as the heat will be decreasing from the edge piece as soon as it is taken out of the hot water. The lower the temperature, the harder it will be to form successfully. Clamp in position and leave until cool. The fabrication from this point follows the same cleaning, gluing, clamping, routering and sanding process as for the straight edge application. When cutting the sink and hob cutouts, be aware that the corners need to be fabricated with a minimum 8mm radius. Finish on the inner side of the radius and by hand smooth the cut edges with 180 grit sandpaper. All exposed chipboard should be sealed using a silicone sealant, including the sink cutout. Please be aware that before fitting the sink into position, the area around the cutout must be polished. Make sure a total film of sealant is applied. The hob cutout requires a heat reflective strip to be applied all the way around to ensure that any heat buildup on the top surface is dissipated away safely. The joint can be fabricated using your normal laminate worktop template jig. We require 3 dog bolts to be equally spaced across the width of the joint to a depth of 25mm to ensure that the bolt pulls through the centre of the joint. Allow 1 adhesive cartridge per joint. As with the edging fabrication, spill the first nozzle's worth of adhesive to ensure the hardener and coloured adhesive are mixing correctly. You have between 5 and 7 minutes of working time with the adhesive before it starts to gel. Attempt to dry run first to ensure all equipment is to hand and that you have easy access to the bolts. Place a piece of masking tape under the edge of the joint face to be glued in order to keep the adhesive on the joint surface and to prevent spillage onto cabinets. Apply 3 thick beads of adhesive towards the top of the joint and spread using a clean spatula so that a full face coverage is achieved. This is to one face only. 4 biscuits need to be spaced evenly across the joint and cut midway in the face. The spacers, which can be found in the adhesive packaging, are placed over the biscuits. You now have between 5 and 7 minutes of working time with the adhesive before it starts to gel. Do a dry run first to ensure that all equipment is to hand. The spacers allow for a 0.2 glue line. Offer up the tops to within approximately 2 mm of each other and apply a last bead of adhesive down the length of the joint before pulling together and tightening the bolts. Check the surfaces are level and adjust if needed before final tightening. A full bead of adhesive should now be sitting on top of the joint line. It is important to leave this bead of adhesive in place until it is hard. On the vertical internal corner of the joint, however, you will need to remove any excess glue spillage, as it will be very difficult to remove it after it is set. The glue will be cured after 35 minutes depending on air temperature. Using 180 grit paper, start to remove the adhesive bead along the length of the joint. When the bead is almost removed, start to sand across the joint to get a perfect flat surface. Feel by hand to gauge the flatness, and when this is achieved, wipe down the surface and change from 180 grit to 320 grit sanding paper. Sand the area using a grid-like pattern, overlapping as you go from north to south and east to west. Continue this action over the rest of the work surface and wipe down, removing all grit and dust. Put the polishing cream onto the surface, 2 metre sections at a time only, and using a Scotch-Brite pad, spread it evenly by hand until all the surface area has been covered. Now attach the same Scotch-Brite pad to the random orbital sander and burnish the polishing cream off. This will take a few minutes to achieve, but the results are worth waiting for. As the surface becomes dry and its appearance becomes dull, put a new dry Scotch-Brite pad on the random orbital sander and continue buffing until an even textured surface is achieved. Repeat this process for the rest of the tops using the same 2 pads in the same sequence. Then wipe down the surface with a damp cloth to remove any debris and dry off with a clean cloth. Finally, spray on the Minerelle polish from the starter kit over the whole of the worktops and rub in. Complete the polishing process by using a second dry cloth and buffing off the residue moisture until an even lustre has been achieved. If using upstands and splashbacks, follow the sanding and polishing sequence as described for all the worktop surfaces. You now have the knowledge to be able to fit this solid surface product successfully.